Hello everyone, it's Price Focus. Just as Nottingham Forest get into the season, it's time for an international break. So we'll take time to discuss what we've learned so far and what we might see in the months ahead in the company of, first of all, Michael Temple. Temps, how are you doing?
I'm good, mate. It's about time we had a serious journalist on here.
Well, I've not been a journalist for ages.
That's the point I'm making.
Thank you. Well, I think you were saying it when I was a journalist anyway, but yeah, thanks for that. Good to have you with us. And our guest today, as mentioned, is the Daily Telegraph's Midlands football reporter, John Percy. John, very good to have you with us. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Temp sort code details still the same. Thank you for that very nice introduction there.
No, yeah, well, good. Good. It's very good to have you with us. I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. Like I say, we'll take stock on the season. We'll discuss the transfer window a bit because it'll be good to get John's insight on that. I mean, it's an interesting time for an international break, John. 3 games. What have you made of it so far? It's not a huge amount of games to look at, but are you feeling very positive? Anything that concerns you or not?
Well, unbeaten's obviously a great start to the season. I think the 3 games, obviously, you can maybe quibble about the opposition. Obviously, the games after the break, I think let's be realistic, that'll be a real barometer of how far the club's gone. But I think you've got to look at them positively. I look at the Bournemouth game. I was at that game. I think they played well for an hour. Maybe they were clinging on a bit at the end, but it wasn't 3-2, which is the positive I would say. From the last 2 games against Bournemouth, Southampton I thought was a really controlled, mature Premier League performance, which shows a bit more evidence of the growth of the club since it's been in the Premier League. I mean, I know obviously the possession stats were ridiculous, but I think last season that would have been a 1-1. I just think it would have been one of those where there'd be a silly mistake at the end or a player would get carried away. And there was that really sort of controlled feeling to it, which obviously Milenkovic, I think, brought to the defence. And then obviously Wolves, I think, it was a frustrating game, wasn't it? I think Wolves were very streetwise. They slowed the game down. They made it disruptive. They, took the sting out of it. And Forest sort of came back second half. But I do think a draw was a fair result. So, yeah, the games after the break, Liverpool, Brighton, they're probably the 2 of the hardest you could get at the moment. So we'll see more evidence of that maturity. But I think you go into those games with confidence because it's been a decent start. And obviously the squad's in a really good place at the moment.
Yeah, I think so, Tam. So one of the things, we've got 5 points. I suppose, is that par, slightly under, slightly over? And alongside that, the points match performance, which is probably the other thing you're looking at this stage of the season.
I think it's par. I think there's a world in which we have 7 points off the back of beating Wolves at the weekend. We had the better chances. Second half, Chris Wood marginally offside, but looking really sharp. I think the most encouraging for me is that plan A is working. There's no need to rip up or change what Nuno's gone into the season thinking, the personnel that he's picked out and what they've delivered for him the first 3 matches. Because in seasons gone by, when we've had this wobble, there's been a desire for mass change. There's been some panic in the ranks and a slightly different atmosphere at the City Ground. So that's the most important thing to me. Great springboard for the rest of the season now, but far tougher challenges to come.
We were recording earlier, John, with Paul Taylor, Greg and Mikey, and one of the things I put to Tails was, do we need some patience in the next bracket of fixtures before the next international break? Because you referenced there Liverpool, Brighton, Chelsea away. Certainly 2 very different fixtures, and we don't know what Chelsea are going to be by that stage. And then Fulham at home. We saw at the weekend, on Twitter, we see after every game we don't win. Twitter's not necessarily a place for patience. Are we going to have to try and find some, do you think, in the next month after this?
Yeah, I think, you may be looking at a completely different set of results after the next international break, but there's got to be a bit of patience. There's still players bedding in. I think personally the squad's in the best place it's been for a long, long time. And I mean, personality-wise, I think there's no bad eggs in there. Everyone's really close. You've got all your sort of relationships. There's obviously the window, which we'll go into, where I think deadline day was another sign of how much the club has, grown up and hasn't shown impulsiveness, getting on the Batshuayi bus or the Divock Origi. There was none of these names. When they couldn't get the striker they were after, they just thought, we'll go with what we've got. They obviously kept the players as well, which I don't think it's really been spoken about that much outside of Elanga. I mean, I think 2 months ago, all the Forest fans were thinking Murillo will be off, Morgan Gibbs-White will be off. Kept both of them without even a bit of a sniff, really. So the window's been really good. And I just think, even if it's the next break and it's 3 defeats to go with the unbeaten start, God forbid, I think there's still got to be the foot on the ball and a bit of perspective.
Is that the big thing for you, Temps, the style of play and the plan? and you can see a cohesion. John referenced that there feels like there's a bond in the team. They look pretty accomplished to me without necessarily getting the goals they probably should, which we might come on to.
I think the difference under Nuno is you just have to be more aware of us out of possession now, because Callum HudsonOdoi is prepared to stand on the fullback. Anthony Elanga breaks at pace. Morgan Gibbs-White's found his position in the team, and there's a genuine physical threat with Chris Wood in this type of form. I think in the past we were either defending or attacking, and it was all about the counter. It still is, like, real good efficiency. I think there was a stat after the Southampton game about number of passes per chance on Match of the Day, and it just showed how direct and the pace at which we like to play with, rather than this side-to-side possession without any kind of adventure style that you sometimes see from these promoted clubs. So that's the biggest change for me. I've really come round to Nuno as a manager who's prepared to work out and stick to the metrics that he knows are going to change the game. The XG thing is clearly of more interest to him, and just change this mentality from happy to be in the game and draw to happy to get out there and be on the front foot. Admittedly, I've said it already. We've had 3 relatively easy games. I don't think you could have designed much of a better run at the start of your season than those 3 sides. Will be tested, but everything suggests now that we're a better team than we were last year. We've come a long way from the team that we were when we first got promoted. And the reason for me is that we've just changed this mindset from needing to avoid defeat to needing to go and earn victory. And the manner in which we set up with those 2 wingers is key to that. And just to echo John's point, massive statement, turning down that bid for Elanga. I think all told, with Almiron's inclusion in that deal, it could have been worth north of £50 million. Like, what world are we in when Forest are turning down finance like that? It's really, really refreshing. And you can see the spine of the team that we are trying to build around, and delighted that this season, at least, Morgan Gibbs-White and Moreno are part of that as well.
Was that shot down quickly, the Elanga thing, John? Or did they really think about it, do you know, or not?
I don't think it ever looked like it was going to happen. I think it was quite late in the window on the Friday. And obviously, it was a lot of money, as Temp says, 50 million, I think, with add-ons plus Almiron. But I think the main thing was that Elanga is such a popular member of the team, gets on so well with everybody. He's a lovely lad, speaks 5 languages. Everyone knows he's still, potential there. He's not there yet. I think there's an understanding that next year it will be his time. But, it was just shot down rather quickly. And that just shows you also how comfortable Forest are with PSR. Obviously not this year, but the year after, because that would have been, if that was even in their thoughts, outside of how popular he is and how much of a prospect he is, that would have been a deal that you would have gone through as a last minute result. Let's make sure we're okay for the next financial year. But as far as I've been told, it was dealt with quite quickly. Obviously, big money. He didn't kick up a fuss, which is obviously crucial as well. So a really good outcome for the club, I think.
I'll come back to transfers in the window in a bit more depth shortly. What do you make of Nuno, John? You'll have interviewed a lot of Forest managers. Each one's different. He seems pretty chilled out. What's he like when you're around him?
Yeah, he's not going to always light up a press conference. Let's say that he says that by his own admission. I think when he came to his opening press conference, he says, "You know me from Wolves, guys. I'm not going to, be your best friend," sort of thing. But he answers every question. He has a glint in his eye when he knows that he could give you a bit of a headline, but doesn't want to. It's almost a bit of a game to him. But I mean, I've always defended him. There's a lot of people in my industry don't like him. They think he's rude, standoffish, which I'm not going to say he's the warmest guy ever. But at Wolves, we were fortunate enough to do a couple of round tables with him, which is where you have sort of 5 or 6 journalists with him for an hour, and everything's sort of off limits. And we saw a different side to him then. So he has got it in him to, unload a little bit and talk more about his personal life and all that. But in a press conference, especially after a game, you're just not going to get that. He's one of those people as well where, say, for example, Forest were 5 games from the end of the season in 4th place, and we want to get him to say Forest are going to finish in Europe. He's just not going to go there. He's just not going to give you that headline. But if you were to speak to him about, you've changed from a 4 to a 3, his eyes then light up because he loves that sort of subject. We'll talk about that all day. But sadly, for my desk, if I ring them and say, he's given us some great stuff on their move to a 3, it's just not going to sell any subscriptions or papers, is it, unfortunately? But I think he's a good guy. I think he's a good manager. I think he understands players. He's close to them with the dressing room and everything. I was fortunate enough to spend 2 days in Spain, and he was in such a good place, because he'd had this pre-season. And if you speak to people, I don't think he's ever had a job yet where he'd been parachuted in midway through a season. So this was all alien to him. But just being able to spend time with the players. There's also a story at Wolves when he came in about how he sat next to Connor Cody on the plane on the way over to Spain or something. And basically said, I've seen you before. You're a right back. We're playing 3. You're going to play in the centre. This is how we're going to play. So that's how important it is for him to set his stall out from minute 1. And he obviously had 10 days in Spain where he could get all that across. And it's not just the stuff on the training field. It's, the camaraderie of the players together, sitting together, eating together. It's all absolutely crucial to him. And it's just all of that sort of team togetherness that he's trying to instill.
John, I don't know Nuno at all. I've never met him, but certainly the reports that you hear, he surrounds himself by expert coaches, potentially people who in their area know more than him, and he's very trusting of that. Perhaps can be a little bit more hands-off than some managers might like to be. Is that your observation?
Absolutely, yeah. He's very loyal to his staff. I think they've more or less been everywhere with him. I think there's one member of staff he had at Wolves who's not come with him, but he was with him at Tottenham, Saudi Arabia. I think it's Ian Cathro. He's obviously not come over with him here, but all the staff he's got, his goalkeeping coach, his number 2, Rui Faria, they've all been there through him. They know him. They know what makes it tick. They stand up to him. I'm led to believe they say if he's wrong, which he takes on board. He's not this sort of like, authoritarian. He'll just ignore everyone. He'll take on board the advice that the coaches give him. So I think it's quite a healthy dynamic. And obviously you see them when Forest score a goal, it's like, the old bear hugs of all 6 or 7 of them. It's it's always been like that with them.
What did you make of the general vibe in Spain? And also, will we play Millwall again in future, do you think? Or is that done?
That was that didn't go down well, that game. I think the post-match comments from Millwall wound them up a little bit as well. And I mean, obviously there was the Elliot Anderson fear that he was injured, but I think a lot of the players were mentioning the challenge on Chris Wood after he scored the goal. And if you can watch it back on YouTube, but I know there was a lot of frustration on that. Anyway, that game's gone now, and fortunately it wasn't a long-term injury to Elliot, who's been fantastic. I think you'd all agree he's made a really good start at Forest. But no, the vibe around the place in Spain, I've covered Forest for a long time. I've never seen anything like it. There was a really tight-knit group. I mean, obviously it's always positive around pre-season. Let's not beat around the bush, but it was just a very clear. Everyone was together. You've got these little relationships within the squad, like Nico and Elliot were very close. Sangari and Bolly inseparable. You've got Ilanga, Callum, and Ola always sort of joking around, but all together they were all there. I mean, Joe Worrell was basically bodyguard to Zach Abbott, the young lad. It was like basically shadowed him everywhere he went, and that was obviously on the club's orders. So that was a great experience for him, I'm sure. But yeah, it was just a really laid back vibe, and they're a good bunch now. I mean, I've been fortunate to see quite a few characters at Forest that you wouldn't want to go for a pint with, but these are all guys that you could hang your hat on, and they all seem a decent lot, which is sadly not always been the case over the years.
I won't ask his name, Annie, don't worry. Let's just circle back to the upcoming fixtures temps, home versus away. Nuno's only won, I think it's 3 home wins versus 4 away wins. Is that a concern going forward? Because I think it puts not winning at home puts pressure on away. And do you think we're better set up to pick up wins away than maybe even at home? I don't know.
For all the reasons John's mentioned, I think we're going to see a step change this year. So I don't attach too much credence to what's gone before as an indicator for what's going to happen this season. He was parachuted in. The balance wasn't quite there. He did have that immediate impact, that bounce with the Newcastle and Man U results, but then it kind of dissipated before he got ourselves back together at the end. I just think for the benefit of that tour, some considered recruitment and considered preparation allayed to getting these ideas instilled in the core of the team, who can now see it working and bought into it. That's the reason why we're going to win more home games. I think my prediction hasn't changed. I think we're 10 to 12 points better than we were last season. And I think the current bottom 6 are the bottom 6. So I haven't got lofty ambition for a top 10 finish. I think that's within the realm of, relatively extreme possibility. But that 12th to 14th bracket would represent meaningful progress for us. And I think we're more than capable of doing it. Now, look, we're going to come up against better teams than those 3 that we've played so far, and seeing what plan B is, if it's 3 at the back, if it's less license for Elanga and Hudson-Odoi, if it's a more defensive blend in midfield, will ultimately tell how we're going to progress when we try to live with the real big boys, the top 6 in particular. But yeah, I stand by my prediction. I think we're going to be 10 points better off than last season. We're going to finish 14th or above, and I have changed my mind on this one. I think Nuno is going to be there at the end of the season. I think he's going to have a full year with Forest.
What do you think about that, John? You cover the whole of the Midlands, so you'll have some insight on Wolves and Leicester. I think Wolves are in a better place than Leicester. Villa are obviously at the other end of the table, but is Temps about right with the teams that are probably going to struggle or not?
I think so, yeah. I think 14th, anything above that is a massive bonus. And I think there are a few clubs that will struggle this season. I think, Everton, it just looks just endless chaos there. They just don't seem to be able to find a break. Southampton, I think the way they're playing, we talk about plan B, they've got to have a plan B, because I just can't see them picking up many wins. It's admirable that he sticks to his principles, but it's just not going to get them points. And then you've got the other, obviously the promoted clubs. So I think Forest can have a decent season. 14th would be a really barometer of progress, because I think a lot of people underestimated how it's an awful cliche, but second season syndrome, I think, is a thing. I think that is quite something you can't ignore. I think the second season people have got used to, the novelty value is gone. So I think that last season was tough, and obviously all the points deduction and the refereeing controversy. So you stick that all into the mix. I know it was it could have been a better season. It was at 4th bottom in the end and lowest points ever for a club to stay up. But I think, as Temp says, I think 14th, that would be, you've just got to consider that's progress. May not be what all the fans want, but I think 14th would be good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I'd love that sort of mid-table anonymity this season, certainly. We'll talk about the transfer window a little more. Next event at the Trent Navigation is our live show on Thursday, 7 p.m. with Lewis and Temps, Mikey, Emily should all be there. So get your tickets. The link is in the description or all over our social media. It'd be great to see as many people down there as possible. Also, after that, there is a comedy night. It's on the 19th of September. The lineup is Brennan Rees, Jack Skipper, Lou Conran. Tickets from gigantic.com, and they're only £15. Apparently, they're really good comedians, I'm told, by people who know. So get down there and show your support and have a good evening. Right, the squad. What's your assessment of it, Temps? Now we've got time to take stock. I don't think you were on the other night, but we've seen it a little bit more. We know where we're going. Is it everything we need? Is it a little bit short? What do you think?
Just love that willingness to not do a deal. The deals we haven't done are probably going to be the best ones in a sense. Not spending 30 million quid on a peripheral Egyptian striker, that might be a bit unfair, but you know what I'm saying. Not dropping mad cash on someone unproven at this level. What excites me most is the depth. So genuinely interested to see where James Ward-Prowse gets in. I think he displaces Elliot Anderson, but there's an argument to say he was man of the match at the weekend. So the balance and the depth means that any player could fall out of there and it not be catastrophic. And we didn't have that before. You did look across the bench at 60 minutes and think, where's the impact coming from here? I think we're going to have that now. I think Taiwo's really interesting one for me, because we perhaps thought even 2 and 3 weeks ago that it would be a matter of time before he displaced Chris Wood and became the starting centre forward. I'm not so sure anymore. Chris Wood is in extremely good form. He's converting chances. We are delivering a style of play that really suits him. Interestingly enough, just that little passage where Morgan Gibbs-White hung one up off a flick off the end of his foot, just knowing that Chris Wood was going to dominate a centre half. Where else would that happen? Would it have happened a year, 2 years ago? I just think he's just in such a vein. We know if we get balls across the face of the goal into the box, he can dominate big centre halves in the air. Goalkeeping position, I'm sold on Matt Sells. Not sure about the backup there, but that aside, I genuinely think there are 22 game-ready players in this squad, and that when suspension or injury or rotation comes, we will not see the dips in form that we might have seen at the start of last season and certainly the year before when our best players weren't at it.
You're not sold on Miguel? You're not seeing enough of him? What's your stance there?
Just a couple of bits. I watched the friendly against the Spanish side at the City Ground, and obviously watched the Newcastle game the other night. I think his key attribute is obviously his physical size, and I'm just yet to be convinced that his hands or his feet are Premier League level. Out of the cup, regrettably, didn't have a massive impact in the shootout. We've allowed Newcastle to triumph in the early round there. No, I'm not. It's a bit unfair, limited sample size, but neither am I down on Matt Sells. I think it's good business to have shipped on Turner. The Vlachodimos thing may go on to be seen as the deal of the century in terms of the finance that it generated for that PSR calculation and allowing for Elliot Anderson to come in. But yeah, for me, there's no battle really. It's going to be Matt Sells for the Premier League campaign.
What about you, John, in terms of the window and what you've heard from speaking to Forest? How are you viewing it? How are they viewing it?
Well, the club are viewing it as a big success. I think balance, as Temp said, is the key word. They think it's a far more balanced squad than they had last season. Obviously, the striker situation, we can look at it as maybe a bit of a blow that they didn't get one. Maybe in a couple of weeks' time, we may be looking at that and thinking, did Forest make a mistake by not getting someone in? But the good thing about it is they weren't impulsive. They thought, let's keep the money, even if it's keeping the money for January. The one thing I must point out on the strikers is that I know this sounds it's not like Championship Manager. Basically, the strikers that they were linked with, the three of them, that would have been whittled down from hundreds. So when it got to Jimenez and Nketiah not happening, and it went to Marmoush, it wasn't a case of Plan Z. I think the three of those were the three top choices whittled down from a lot of other choices, where if they got one of them, they'd be quite happy with it. And obviously, I think they were talking to Marmoush and his agent for quite a few weeks before it actually came out. And I know I got a few messages on social saying the club are using you. It's a smokescreen. Honestly, I wish it worked like that. It would make our job so much easier. But it was an option, but it didn't happen. Obviously, the other two didn't happen as well. But the fact that I think Wednesday night's game against Newcastle with Jota Silva and Sosa, the way they played, I think that would have stuck in their minds as well. And they would have thought, look how well they played against a decent Newcastle, almost full strength team. They've shown no fear. If the worst was to come to the worst and Taiwo Wood was to get injured, we could play one of them up there or Elanga. So I think that game was instructive for them to realise that they have got forward options if there is an absolute injury crisis with the two strikers. But obviously the balance they've got two players for every position now. I think the sensible recruitment in Danilo's injury, you go for Ward-Prowse, proven Premier League player, great with set pieces, which also solves the problem of set pieces that has been Forest's problem for a while. And also what I liked about the transfer window from my point of view was it was very clever on the pipeline. They call it the pipeline in recruitment. Recruitment people call it the pipeline, where there's a succession policy where Murillo will go probably next year, won't he? So you bring in Morato. Elanga will probably go because you've had the sign already from Newcastle. So Sosa's there. When Leicester were at their best after they won the league, they did that every year where there was a pipeline where they get a player a year before. So if Maguire was going to go, they had Soyuncu or Fofana. And that was when they were a very well recruitment. And I think, I get a bit tired sometimes from a national point of view, how people slag Forest off as like this mad gung-ho club. The last 2 years, the recruitment's been really good. It's been really sensible. There's long-term signings. This succession policy is now in place of replacing players that will eventually go for big money. And I just think, past all this, the narrative of the first transfer window, which was obviously a necessity, you have to look at their recruitment and think it's been very shrewd.
Where does David Carmo fit in? Do you think he's got a long-term Forest future as potentially Murillo's successor, or is that?
Yeah, I mean, he's left-sided, isn't he? He's very highly thought of. Olympiacos played a massive part in their winning the Europa Conference League last season. I've seen him a couple of times. He looks decent, whether he comes to Forest. But I think Morato was obviously a player they'd gone after for a few years. I think he's left-sided. Well, Carmo certainly is. So you would assume that is one that would replace Murillo when he does go and can play in a 3 or a 4.
Did
you want to come in there, Temps? You're unmuted, so I cut you off.
Just the value things, writing a few down. Aina Murillo, Callum HudsonOdoi, Elanga. That's next level recruitment. Elanga
Gibbs White as well, really.
Football. Yeah, definitely.
Gibbs White, double that, isn't he? With the England call up, more than double.
And I was dubious at the time, not on the player but on the value, John. As that edge towards 30 million plus, I hadn't quite seen what is obviously a bit plainer to see now. But so refreshing to see that. And I don't think there's no hype train around James Ward-Prowse at the minute because we haven't seen him. But when he gets going for Forest, he'll become integral. I just think that quality from set pieces. We saw it with Elliot Anderson. Even some of the balls he whipped in against Newcastle, the corner for Chris Wood. There is a certain quality that he has that's been lacking for the past 2 seasons, and Ward-Prowse kicks it on again. I think he's only under the radar at the minute because he hasn't played yet. But in 5-10 games, we'll all see what Ward-Prowse is about.
Well, they used to say, didn't they? If you give a free kick away 20 yards from goal, it's like giving away a penalty when Ward-Prowse is around because he just never misses. So to have that sort of weaponry in your midfield is encouraging.
Do you think, John, is there a possibility of going in for a free agent striker, or have they moved away from that? Because historically they might have gone for a big name like Depay or Martial or someone like that. Did they not feel the need for that internally now?
The noises were that they were happy with what they've got, but I mean, whether something comes up in the next few weeks is, injuries obviously permitting. But from what I can hear and what Nuno said on Saturday after the Wolves game is he's quite happy with his options, and he kept referring to the word mistakes. We can't use mistakes, can't make mistakes. And I think bringing in the wrong player, wrong character at this time would be what the mistake he's referring to. So time will tell, but I don't think it's something they'd look at the moment.
And last one on the window as well. They pursued quite hard for goalkeepers by the sound of it. Kelleher was strongly linked. It reported that kind of slightly mad bid to try and get Liverpool to take Matt Turner, which I don't know if they were ever going to. Will they revisit that in January? Is that something they're constantly monitoring, do you think, or are they pretty sold on Sells and Miguel for now?
I've got to be honest. I think the goalkeeper situation is one it's always been fluid, hasn't it? I mean, it's just Sells, I think, is a decent keeper. I think he'd played quite a big part towards the end of last season in keeping the club out of the mud. Really, I think, especially Sheffield United away, was. If you remember that first half an hour, it was awful, and it was. It wasn't for Sells and Murillo, it could have been an embarrassment that game. But I just think the goalkeeper is the one they've never really cracked. I mean, it's an easy ammunition for neutral fans when it comes to Forest and the goalkeepers, because I think it's what 8 or 9 now, isn't it? I know injuries have had a part, but they've just never seemed to crack that. Henderson was the one they wanted. I think it's no secret they couldn't get a deal done. But I think January that might be something they still look at. But, Sells might go on and be ultra consistent. But obviously since the Breeze Samba thing, it's just something that's always been never looked right, has it? I'm sure you'd agree with me, lads.
Well, Temps, you've always said Breeze Samba was the worst signing, that they didn't make, the signing they should have made first above everything.
Pay Samba the money, it'd have been a very different conversation, John, turning from an unknown to France's second choice. I just think that was a badly handled negotiation. Probably felt like bad value at the time, and it's definitely a bit of a hindsight thing now. But I can only imagine the finance that went into getting Keelan Navas into the Forest squad for that period of time. Hendo, but for that injury, wouldn't have gone back to the parent club. I think we'd have made a real move to grab him there. Yeah, Ramsdale was clearly in the market and could have been done if we'd have really wanted to. Just prioritise the cash elsewhere. But I get Sells is the safe choice. Is the low risk, no risk choice in the sense he's never going to let us down. Is he going to be there in 5 years' time? No, I don't think he'll be there in 2 years' time. But those kind of Hendo, Ramsdale level keepers, England's numbers 2, 3, 4. Aren't ever so easy to come across. So we will be talking about goalkeepers more and more in the 18 months ahead, I think.
He couldn't have saved that goal at the weekend, could he, John? There's a few people saying, well, he should have saved it or Miguel would have saved it. Not something I'm buying personally. I thought it was just a good strike.
Out of nowhere as well, wasn't it? I don't think he expected him to shoot at that time as well. He caught it almost on the ball was going on the up, but I don't think you can blame Sells for that, no.
Can't blame the keeper for that. I think Callum can make a more robust challenge while the ball's coming down out of the sky, but that's just a worldy hit. It's moving, catches it flush. Not blaming the keeper for that.
Did Sangare not get blamed for it? Because he seems to get blamed for everything else on social media, especially.
He did get blamed for it. Yeah, he did.
I do feel sorry for him. I've got to put my hand up and say that I think obviously he's not played his best football yet, but I think the performances this season definitely showing promise. And he's not going to get the headlines. He's not this N'Golo Kante player who'll nick the ball off you and then run 30 yards. He's just there to do a job. It's almost like the Brian Clough quote, isn't it? Get the ball off someone, then give it to someone who can play better, who can pass it. And that's not taking anything away from his passing because he has got a wide range. But I just think with Sangare, there's got to be a bit of patience shown, I think, because he obviously had an awful time last year. I think he lost like nearly 3 kilograms in weight, after this virus, all adjusting to a new country and everything, a new league. I just see some of the stuff on social media about him. I just hope he's not reading it because it just feels like a bit unfair sometimes.
I think we're starting to see the best of him now. I think he's leading the Premier League in tackles. Is it 15 so far?
Yeah,
and he is doing bits with the ball. So I'll back him. I think we are seeing what he is now.
Yeah.
He's not this all action box to box attacking midfielder. He can be a genuine number 8, but ultimately he's there to win ball and bring in the creative boys and the dribblers.
Yeah.
What about let's talk about a bit about Anderson. It feels like he's not gone under the radar, John, but we haven't focused on how good he is and how good he can be. I mean, what have you made of him so far, and how much more do you think is to come from him? Hopefully,
well, there's so much more to come from him. I think from speaking to the club, they're not the one they're the most happy with because obviously they're content with all of them, but I think they were really pleased with that one. They were surprised at obviously the price they got for him. We can go into with a Vlachodimos one, but I think there's so much more to come from him. It's where's his best position. I mean, if Morgan was to ever get sold, I think he could play number 10. I think he could play centre mid. He's got such a wide range of skills and passing. And what you have to think with him as well, to have made such an impact early on, is Newcastle, him leaving his hometown club would have been an absolute nightmare for him. If you'd have said to him a year ago, you're going to leave, all he would have ever wanted to do a year ago was to play for his hometown club. So he's had that disappointment, I would say, of leaving that club for a new one, where it was obviously due to PSR. So there's that element of, why me as well. But to come in and make that impact as he has, I think he's going to be really good for the club. And I think, as you say, there's way more to come from him.
What about where he fits, Temps? When Ward-Prowse is there, when Sangare is there, Nico Dominguez didn't get off the bench at the weekend. Some good choices for Nuno, at least.
My strong suspicion is that James Ward-Prowse gets his spot sooner rather than later. But then Elliot Anderson competes with all 3 of those central 3 for all the reasons that John mentions. And you won't be able to pick your first choice 3 every game in the Premier League. Just doesn't happen. So he'll get games. I can see him getting 20 plus starts this year for Forest. But it is going to be tougher for him when Danilo's back. It is going to be tougher for him if James Ward-Prowse hits form. Ultimately, if he wants to be the number 10, he's got to wait for Morgan to leave. I don't think he's on his plane as a creative player. But he is able to supplement what Morgan does. He'll make him a better player by letting him occupy spaces further up the pitch. We see quite often Morgan dropping deep out of the pocket to try and get on the ball more where he's frustrated. When he affects the game most is the Fulham performance, when he's got 2 screeners winning ball for him, finding him central third and further forward and letting him make that pass before the assist or drive directly at goal. So I think Elliot Anderson supports Morgan Gibbs-White, perhaps in a way that James Ward-Prowse doesn't. If I can contradict myself slightly, but his standing, his game management means that I think he falls out of the side for Ward-Prowse before finding a way back in.
What about Yatesy, John? You'll have seen him grow for years and years and years. Has he reached his ceiling, do you think, deep down or not?
I just think every manager's always picked him. So whatever people think of him as a player, he's absolutely integral to Forest, I think. And I just think we were talking actually before we came on air, weren't we, Matt, about the gamesmanship that's maybe lacking in the team a lot. And I think Yatesy does bring that. I think he can slow the game down. He can, get free kicks. I think there aren't enough Forest players in the team that do that yet. Anyway, I mean, maybe that'll come with time, but you never ever write off Ryan Yates. I think we've all learned that over the years, haven't we? He's always come back, always played well, always recovered when you've written him off or you thought his place will go. Where he plays, obviously that's the big question. It's whether Sangare if he continues to improve as he has done, then it might be difficult for him to get in. But I mean, when Danilo went off in the Bournemouth game, another thing that really never got spoken about was how well Yates played when he came on. To do that in that time so early in the game, when there's obviously been an awful injury, he just came on, picked it straight up like that, and that was very underrated how he played, I thought.
Gentlemen, indulge me for about 45 seconds while I attempt to sell a house. Here we go. Right. Thanks very much to Ben Sales, as ever. And this is what I'm reading out that he's written. Indulge in the epitome of modern living with this captivating 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom detached property in Nottingham, offering approximately 2,000 square foot of luxurious living space. Step inside to discover a grand hallway with a majestic vaulted ceiling, leading you into the heart of the home, a spectacular open plan kitchen and lounge area. So as I say, you get 4 bedrooms, open plan lounge, dining and kitchen, off-street parking, utility room, downstairs toilet, underfloor heating to ground floor, first floor office, garage with electric doors, gas central heating, EPC rating C, and I've managed to talk perfectly over the window. If either of you chaps have got 550 grand to spare this month, then that is yours in Church Lane in Brinsley. Link for the property is in the description. Are you going to buy attempts to give me my commission?
Is it within walking distance of the nav?
Everywhere's within walking distance of the nav if you're prepared to put some of these steps in, yeah.
I'll take it. And the one next door.
Good. Right. Well, if you don't buy it, John will, I'm sure. So there we go.
Sales technique, Matthew.
Thank you. It's funny, John, isn't it? Being a trained journalist, allegedly, according to Temps, in my case, it's a bit of fish out of water trying to do all this stuff and sell stuff on the fly. So yeah, thank you for recognising my greatness, even if Temps doesn't. Right, a couple of other players to talk about before I let the chaps go. HudsonOdoi is an interesting one, John. It's a big season for him, actually, because he's only got 2 years left on his contract.
Yeah.
What are you expecting from? What are you hoping from him? Teams are doubling up on him all the time. It's making
I think he's definitely. I think teams have got his number with the cutting inside with the shot, which obviously he did a lot last season. I think you've seen probably in all of the games that defenders are onto that now. So he needs to basically work on that one, because it seems like teams have worked him out a little bit, but I think he's got the ability to obviously play other ways. I mean, I think he could switch wings as well if it was an option to do that as well. For £3 million, it's just. I mean, if he was to leave in January or whatever, he's paid his money back handsomely already, hasn't he? But Nuno's very set on that 3, isn't he? Of Morgan, Callum, and Elanga with Woody up front. So I mean, I think it'd be his place to lose, but he's obviously got competition now. So, I think he knows that he's got to play well every week or he will be replaced by a Jota Silva or a Sosa.
This is a wild comparison, but I'm sure you boys watched Man U Liverpool yesterday, and watching the ghost of Marcus Rashford decline the opportunity to run at a fullback was in such stark contrast to what we're seeing from Callum. And yes, he does like to check back in and find that fast stick, but he's more than capable of getting to the byline as well. And he's unselfish enough to look for that back stick cross when he can. I'd have him over Marcus in my team at the minute, every day of the week. I think he's so positive. I think as soon as he sees that his fullback's disciplined, he's willing to cheat, and that just alters our out ball completely from what it was before. I think we manufacture ball to the left-hand side because we can see he's generally got a mismatch if he's one-on-one. And if he finds himself doubled up, leaving pockets of space elsewhere, and you've got the range of passing of Morgan Gibbs-White, James Prowse, and Elliot Anderson in your side, it can only be a good thing. Really appreciate what his role in the team now. Fantastic bit of business. That is incredible value. And Christmas, that period just after, has to be the time, and we try to extend that contract, because whilst he will have ambition to play at a club with a top 8, top 6 ambition, I think that he's someone that we should be absolutely keen to keep, and he owes us nothing already.
It wouldn't surprise me if they did similar with Elanga as well after all the Newcastle thing. I think a new contract would be the most sensible next step. Protect his value, let him know again how valued he is by the club. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me if that's something in the next few weeks as well.
Well, Chelsea are doing
23 years old. 23 years old. Feels like he's been in football for far longer than that.
Yeah.
True. You'll have seen quite a lot of Moreno at Villa John. Will he help him? I've got this theory that he will, because he's going to just overlap and hit the byline and free up space for Callum. Does that potentially tally with what you've seen of Moreno?
Yeah, he's very much an overlapping fullback. He likes to get forward. I think his first season at Villa, he was very good. Second season, he struggled a bit. Obviously, Luca Dean played more games as number one left back, but I think he's good with set pieces as well. Moreno, he's a good athlete, good age, experience, can maybe bring that gamesmanship that maybe the team's lacking a little bit. It's whether he comes in to replace Ola. Maybe that's the change they're looking at. Those two competing for a place with each other. But no, he's very much, as you say, he will relieve the attacking pressure on HudsonOdoi and help support him down that left as well.
You're the first person on here to say he'll replace Ola potentially. We've all just said Nico's the one who's on the chopping block. Do you potentially see it differently then?
No, I just think if you're going light for light with a left and a left, then he would be the obvious one. But I mean, once again, Ola's been tremendous business, free transfer. I mean, I remember when he was signed, people hadn't even heard of him, but he's been tremendous. Nico, obviously, he's right back. He got caught a couple of times against Wolves, didn't he? But he's so good going forward. But these are the dilemmas Nuno wants to have. I don't think last season he could have that option of replacing people or even having the depth of competition, but he's got that now. So it's a nice headache to have, I imagine.
There's a little headache with a little question mark against each of the fullbacks temps. The Nico defensively, but specifically the ball inside him, he seems to struggle with. He got caught out again at the weekend. Ola's probably more, I mean, he just blows up quite early in games. He did play the 90 at the weekend, I think I'm right in saying, but him and Sangare particularly struggled to last games, I think.
And he can play both sides. So I think if you're going to have doubt over a player in particular, who would it be for me? It's Nico on form, isn't it? But he hasn't started this season quite how he finished last season. He was exceptional last year. Had to relearn the position, having come in ostensibly as a lookalike Jed Spence to play in a wing-back system, and all of a sudden we didn't need wing-back. So he has had to be a bit more rigid defensively, but he still gets up the line, still overlaps his winger, and I think he kind of made that right-back position his own. But that's by virtue of the fact that Alex Moreno has arrived, we can now have game-by-game debates about both those fullbacks when they were both automatic picks back end of last season. So I'll just echo John's point. That's the right thing. And they're all going to have a bit of bench time this year because they're all going to be expected to go forward. They're all going to be caught wanting it at various times. And I can see those three getting a relatively equitable amount of game time.
Was Nico close to going, John, or was that his agent kicking up a fuss, trying to potentially manufacture a new deal or anything like that? Because there was some reported interest.
It was West Ham, wasn't it? Yeah. That was out in Spain. I think that story came out, and I think I was shut down quite quickly as well. I don't know whether it ever got serious, but I know Aston Villa were considering him very early in the window as a possible option. Obviously, that never came to anything as well. But so it just shows you he is highly rated as a Premier League player. He just needs to stay consistent, and I think he'll be okay.
Excellent. Last question I had for you, John. I was just on Danilo. If there's any update on a time scale for him, if you has he had his surgery now? He has.
Yeah, his surgery last week. Apparently, it was a clean break at the time. So I think the initial reaction of 3-4 months, I think there was a lot of optimism that it would be shorter than that. So, but I think he's still looking at around Christmas time, and that sort of maybe a little bit earlier. But I know that they were relieved that it was. It looked far worse at the time, but I think they were quite relieved that it was an actual clean break that won't keep him out for as long as they initially thought.
Oh, that's good to hear. Good to hear. Right, we should probably just wind it up there. Thames, any shameless plugs? Anything you want to pitch, or any final thoughts? Cricket season's almost over.
No, I'll keep the beer festival in the pocket for a little bit, but yeah, everyone knows my website, trentbridge.co.uk. Come watch some cricket if you fancy it. If you don't, stick to football. I don't push it down people's throats too hard, I don't think. But yeah, plenty going off, and yeah, good to meet you, John. Read your stuff, obviously, and always get excited when I see one of your tweets.
Oh, thanks, mate. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's good. It's good. Anything you want to plug shamelessly, John, before we let you go?
Just the Telegraph.
Telegraph sports pages.
Yeah, please subscribe and keep me in a job. Thanks very much.
That's half the battle these days, certainly in the media. Yeah, true. Right. Great to have the chaps on. We shall be back tomorrow with a lady who teaches new signings who don't speak English. She teaches them English, which is quite interesting. So Murillo and Sangare, to hear about the process of how she's done that. So something way off piste, but I thought it'd be quite interesting to hear from her. And then obviously the live show. Buy your tickets for the live show, please. Keep me in a job. That'd be very helpful. Right, Michael Temple, thank you very much.
Cheers, fellas. Thanks for the chat.
John Percy, great pleasure to have you. Thank you very much.
Merci, mon ami.
You don't need an English teacher. You don't even need a French teacher. What a man. Right, thanks very much, everyone. Have a good day. If we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.
Cheers all.